So, welcome to what is now the 50th lug. Yay, awesome. I can't take credit for it all because obviously there were people who set it up. So, Jasper and Will and Kat and Russ and some other people who may have been leaders over the time. So I've only taken it over for just under 2 years, but without them setting it up in the first place, this wouldn't be happening now, and all of you fine folk wouldn't be here with these fine folk behind the bar. Talking about the bar, there is some food, mini burritos, which have got salsa, cheese.
And something else.
Dean was listening, and I wasn't. So if you want some food, there's food at the bar. Anyway, so on with tonight. So we've got 3 speakers, although 2 are on talk. So Alex McAusland is over there, so he's going to be talking about Unity IP. No, damn it, I read that wrong. I said IAP. It's on the screen, and I can see it. Then Sol and the Rewind team are going to be talking about how they've used Unity in some of their VR stuff. So Rewind, they did a talk a little while ago. Then we're going to take a break, so you can go and buy some fine beer. And if you want to buy some fine beer as this is going on, I'm sure they won't mind selling you beer. And then Andy's here, not to do a, this is all the cool stuff in Unity that's coming up, but to do a swag for questions. So we have, I don't even know where it is, I never actually asked for it. James, where is the swag? Okay, we'll grab that after the break. So a whole bunch of Unity swag for questions. So a wee bit of a pub quiz, but with some prizes with Unity branding on it. So thank you for that. Then we've got open mic. So I know that there's 2 people who want to come up to do that. One of them is, well, I say come up to do it. One of them is coming from France. So hopefully my MiFi thing isn't going to break halfway through. But there's an online conference which one of the speakers, organisers, wants to talk to you about. Then Jakir, one of my students who wants to just give a little overview of his project, but is also looking for testers to go through actually testing it with all of the stuff which Jakir will tell you about. So if anyone else wants an open mic slot, let me know during the break, and I'll try and keep a list and not accidentally delete it like I did last week or month. And with no further ado, Alex.
So I'm Alex McAusland. I'm currently working for Unity. I have a background as an indie game developer. In fact, a really bad indie game developer. I spent a couple of years doing it and made a series of awful games, which didn't go very well. So I went into making tools instead. So I made a plugin on the Unity Asset Store called Unibill, and that was designed to help you take in-app payments across lots of different app stores without writing a whole bunch of different code. So last year, Unity bought Unibill, and I've been working with them since on Unity IAP, which is an engine-integrated in-app payments API. And it went out in Unity 5.3 in December, and we're still working on it now, adding more like stores and new cool features, which I'll tell you about later on. So there's a bit of background into IAP. I'm sure most people are familiar with it, but there are 3 main things you can sell in an app. You've got non-consumables, which are things like extra levels or items in your game, the kind of stuff that you buy once and own forever. You've got consumables, which are typically used to implement stuff like a virtual currency, because you can buy it again and again. And subscriptions, which have a duration. They expire at some point. So Unity IAP helps you sell all of that stuff in your game, and it helps you do it across all of these different stores. So we've got the main ones like Google Play and iOS and Apple stores. We're going to support Amazon and Samsung fairly soon. And then you can also write your own store implementations. So this API is pluggable. We provide store implementations as Unity, but anyone can provide their own stores. So if you want to bring your app to a Chinese app store, you can just pull in their plugin that they've hopefully written for you, and you can target that store without having to rewrite all of your purchasing logic, right? It should just all work the same way. So I'm going to run through a little demo here of a scenario that you might use Unity IAP in. So this is based on one of Unity's educational assets, which is called the survival shooter. So I'll just show you this game here real quick. This is a survival shooter where you're this little dude here with his nightcap on, surviving against endless waves of these undead toys. So the game mechanics are pretty basic. It's all about surviving as long as you can and getting better stuff to defeat them. So the game features a shop. We can see we've got a few things we can buy, like a red laser, a blue laser, or a health pack. So if we're running low on health, we can buy a health pack and we can keep buying that. Whereas the guns are kind of non-consumables. They're something you buy once and you own them forever. So right now, these buttons don't do anything. So what we're going to do is use Unity IAP to actually make that happen. Right? We're going to put the code behind those buttons so that when you click them, you're taken through the checkout process, and it's going to work across all of those stores that I mentioned. Right? So you could deploy this to any of the major app stores. So to start off with Unity IAP, you'll find it here. Well, you won't find it here because I haven't got any network, but you would find it here in the Cloud Services window, which you would then enable and import into your project. Luckily, I've already done it here. So you can see I've got Unity Purchasing in my plugins folder. So I'm going to get started writing a little bit of code. So I'm going to start off writing the glue that's going to bind this game into Unity IAP. So I'm going to call this script purchaser. I'll zoom the screen in a minute. So this is going to be the code that talks to Unity IAP. Right, let me see if I can make this a little bigger for you. How's that? Can people see that? So I start out with a mono behavior. You don't have to use a mono behavior for this. I'm going to for expediency here. First thing I'm going to do is import Unity engine.purchasing, which is where you'll find Unity IAP. And the first thing I'm going to do is start configuring it. So there's a whole bunch of things you need to tell Unity IAP before you can use it. So I'm going to start off with a builder, which is found here. And that builder is going to need a purchasing module. So what you're seeing here is the plugin mechanism that's built into Unity IAP. So I'm creating an instance of Unity's purchasing module, which contains all of our store implementations that I mentioned for iOS and Google Play and so on. And I'm going to pass that module into Unity IAP. Now, if you had another app store you were targeting, you could just add that module here and you'd be able to deploy to that app store. The next thing, I'm just going to configure the UI to work the same way it would work if you were running on a device. So when you're defining in-app products, you've got to tell Unity IAP what it is you're selling in your app, which is just a list of IDs and some types. I'll show you that right now. So in this game here, we are going to be selling 3 different items. I mentioned them earlier. We've got a red laser, which is non-consumable, blue laser, which is the same, and health, which is consumable. So I need to define these items in order that I can buy them. So I'm going to use the add product method here to create my red laser. And I've got to tell Unity IAP what type it is. So I'm going to give it a product type enum, which I can't really see right now. I'm going to say that's non-consumable. I'm going to do the same for the blue laser. And the same again for the health pack. So I'm just going to, you can call these things whatever you want. I'm just adopting this naming convention here, so this one's going to be a consumable because you can buy it multiple times. Okay, so I've defined my products and I'm nearly ready to initialize Unity IAP, and I do that via a static method called unityPurchasing.initialize.
So one of the parameters I need to provide here is my builder, which configures the products that we're selling. The other thing, the first parameter you can see here is this iStore listener. So that listener is how Unity IAP communicates with your app. You need to give Unity IAP one of these things so that Unity IAP can tell your app when stuff happens. So for example, when the user buys something, when they fail to buy something, or when Unity IAP is actually ready to do its thing. So I'm going to have this purchaser implement this interface for us. So I'm passing in a reference to this current object, and I'm going to make my class implement the iStore listener. Now let's have MonoDevelop generate all of those methods for us. So I don't know if you can see here, we've just had all of the different methods for that interface added to our project. So we need to add the code now into these methods. There's only a few of these we need to worry about. The first one is onInitialized. So this is what Unity IAP calls back with when it's ready to go. You can see the API is asynchronous here. It might take a long time before it's ready to initialize. If you're offline or the internet's slow, it could take a long time. And when it is ready, it gives us this controller. So I'm gonna keep a handle to this controller, and I'm going to show you what's on this controller. So this controller is what we actually use to then talk to Unity IAP. So we can tell Unity IAP to start a purchase using this controller, or we can browse information about the products that we're selling. So you can see the controller here has a products property, and I can see information about the products that I'm selling. So typically, you'll want to present a localized store to your users. So users want to see things in their currency and in their language. So you can pull out localized information from each product using this interface here, and then you can present a completely customized UI. We're not gonna go through that today. All we're going to do is keep a reference to this controller because we need this controller to actually use Unity IAP. So we're going to add a reference to our controller and keep a handle to it. The other thing that Unity IAP gives us is this store extensions type. Now, this is used to access store-specific functionality. So, certain stores do store-specific things that are not available in every store, and you can access that functionality via an extension. But we're not going to worry about that today. That's kind of an advanced feature. So right now we're just gonna just print out a little bit of information about each product. So I'm going to log each product. So you can see it's got a metadata property, and I'm going to log its localized title. So when Unity IAP initializes, we should see some logging information that's dumped out. So if I go back to the editor here, I've already created an IAP Manager game object. Nothing in it right now, so I'm going to drag my purchaser script into it. That's interesting. Doesn't like the fact that the name of the class is different to the name of the file, so let me go back to my game object here and add my script onto it. Okay, so when this script initializes, it's going to initialize Unity IAP, and we should see a little bit of information printed to the log here. So we've got our product metadata. So Unity IAP works in the editor. You don't have to deploy it to a device to test your application. It provides a fake store implementation so that you can test all of the normal purchasing flows and get your logic set up without having to fiddle around deploying to a device. So the next thing we need to do is make our store actually talk to Unity IAP. So you can see how our store works. We should have a bit of UI here if I just run into the shop and bring it up. So you can see our store is made with Unity UI. We've just got a bunch of buttons in it. And what I'm going to do is click up this button handler so that when we click on the red laser, we talk to Unity IAP and say buy the red laser. And we kick off the purchasing flow. So I'm going to go to the button and I'm going to say when you're clicked, I want you to talk to the IAP manager. And I need to define a function to handle this in my IAP manager. So I'm going to define a purchasing function that takes a string saying what products I want you to buy. And I'm going to call that from here. So I want this button to call my purchase method I've just defined. And it's going to call it with the parameter laser.red, because that's my laser.red product ID. Do the same for the blue laser. I add my store manager as the target. I direct it to that method, and I give it the laser.blue parameter. For my health, similarly, I'm just hooking up the same button. With the ID of my health pack that I'm selling. So that's going to call into this method here. Then we just need to initiate the purchase process with Unity IAP. So I'm using the controller that Unity IAP gives us when we initialize, and I'm going to call the initiate purchase method with that product ID. So assuming that purchase goes okay, we're going to get our process purchase method invoked here. So this takes a purchase event args, which tells us information about what purchase just occurred, and it returns a purchase processing result. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So if we look at what is on this event args, we've got the product that was purchased, and we can read all sorts of information about what the user has bought. So what we need to do is basically make a decision. If they bought one of the lasers, we want to give them the laser. If they bought the health pack, we want to boost their health. So what we need to do is just pay attention to the ID of the product. So if they got laser.red, then what we want to do is give them the laser. And the same for all of the other items. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend implementing a store like this, but this is just an illustration of how the logic flows. So we've got laser.red, laser.blue, and we've also got our health pack. So in order to hook this up to my game logic, I need to speak to the gun that is controlled by our player here. So our player, if we go back into the Unity editor here, has a gun, and it's this that determines what happens when the fire button is pressed. So it's this script that we need to speak to give the guy the gun, the player shooting script. So I'm going to go back to the editor here. I'm going to create a reference to the player shooter, I think it's called. And then we can set that from the editor so that our store is able to speak to the gun, and so we can actually unlock the gun when at the appropriate moment. The other thing is player health. So we need to be able to give the guy some more health when they buy the health pack. So I've added those references to the purchasing store, and what am I going to do? I'm going to credit the guy's health with 20 when that is bought. So I'm saying health.heal. The health component has this heal method that takes an amount, and I'm just going to say heal 20 points of damage at that point. With the shooter, I'm going to say all I'm going to do is set the color. So this is an example of very basic weapon configuration. So all I'm going to do is change the color of the laser. You can change the damage here, you could do whatever you want. So that should hook up our purchaser to the things it needs to speak to. So I just need to set up those references here. Now then. I'm wondering why. Oh, I've got a compilation error. Right, oh yes. So, this process purchase method that I've been working on here, you'll notice that it returns a result. So, when a purchase occurs, your application actually needs to respond to Unity IAP and tell it whether or not your application has actually finished processing the purchase. In this case, we're just going to return a result of complete. Is that right? Okay. And what that means is Unity IAP will not tell us about this purchase again. If you return a result of pending, it will tell you about it again the next time your application starts. And that is necessary if you're doing things like cloud save or saving state to a server somewhere, and you need purchases to be reliable, which obviously you do. Okay, I should have fixed my compilation errors. I just need to set up the references on my IAP manager. So I need to give it a reference to the gun and give it a reference to the player health, which is on the player component here. So I think we should be good to go for a test run here. Oh, I was in play mode, so I've just lost all of that work. I'm sure you've been there as well. Okay, so you can see that I start off the game with this basic gun here. If I buy the red laser, then hopefully nothing's happened. So let's see what happened in our log here. Doesn't look like anything happened when I click this button. Yeah, probably I was in play mode when I was setting up those references as well. I've lost so much time to that. So I just got to set up those references again. I'll just set up one of them. I won't waste your time going through all of that again. Okay. So now I buy the red laser, and what I see is Unity IAP's fake purchase dialog. So in the real world, when you start an in-app purchase in your application, the first thing the user sees is a dialog a little bit like this, saying basically, are you sure you want to spend £500 on IAPs? So this UI is designed to mimic that. In this case, we do want to buy it. And when we click this buy button, Unity IAP responds to your application saying, process this purchase. And we're going to credit the guy with the laser. So we've just bought the laser, and we can see we now have a red laser. So that gives you a feel for, hopefully gives you a feel for how the API works overall. If anyone's got any questions along the way, then just dive in and ask. Hopefully this is making sense. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about, which is what we're working on next, which is some anti-fraud measures. So IAP fraud is a huge problem. Not surprisingly, people are keen to get something for nothing if they can. So what we've been working on is an anti-fraud library, which basically helps you validate the receipts that stores give you, make sure they're genuine, and make sure that the user's actually entitled to what they claim to be entitled to. So this week or next, we'll be launching this receipt validation toolkit. What that's designed to do is basically help you decide whether or not a purchase is genuine. What it does is obfuscates within your application the secrets that you need to perform strong receipt validation using encryption, or using cryptography, I should say. And then at runtime, when the stores say, hey, a purchase has occurred, this is my receipt, you can actually use that library to decide if, in fact, that purchase is genuine. Because a huge amount of IAP purchases are fraudulent at the moment. There's an awful lot of tools out there to help you bypass, IAP systems. So that's about it from me. Thanks very much.
Hi, my name's Sol Rogers. I'm the founding manager director of Rewind. We're a VR production studio, games and other interesting things. I've also was Darren's lecturer once upon a time. Just saying, taught you everything you knew. Not quite, not at all. I was a master's student. He was an undergrad, so it doesn't really count at all. But I understand the pain of going through university and trying to get out the other side and having amazing ideas and being told to write essays, which no one wants to write, and I'm sure Darren knows the same thing. So I want to talk a bit about us, just really briefly, and then I'm going to hand you over to Ben, who's our senior developer here, and talk about how we use Unity across everything we do. So we did all this sort of stuff in the past. So projection mapping for launch of Xbox One, Bjork's music video, made horses disappear for Stella, interactive augmented reality champagne stands for Formula One, the touchscreen thing from Wizard of Oz, launch Black Friars 1, Game of Thrones-y type films, PlayStation 4's behind the scenes, all kinds of random stuff. All of it's to do with CG, interactivity, animation, visual effects, and to me they're all the same thing, software and hardware agnostic, it's one and the same thing. And the lovely thing about Unity is it's the core of all of this. It really has been used across everything we do. Most recently, though, it's lots of stupid VR things. And I've shown this picture before. This is me standing in front of our office in a high street wearing a VR headset, not plugged into anything, looking like an idiot. Helping Logan write an article on the future of virtual sex. We don't work in that industry, just so you know, don't ask us. But the BBC came up and did a BBC 3 documentary, which made me really embarrassed when my granny watched it. Don't watch from midway on, it gets really weird. And lots of this, and heads up with Google and VR UK and also University. We also run VRLO, which is a meetup for virtual reality work. Next one's on the 24th of March. Please come if you have anything to show. It's getting kind of busy and exciting. We won an award from Lord Marlon. This is BBC Director General Tony Hall and a very scared R&D lady. Really freaking scared. And I took my wife on the best holiday of my life, which was Pixar, Autodesk, Microsoft HoloLens, Facebook, and Valve with back to back to back to back. She kind of got on with it. It was definitely a holiday for me. So this is the sort of stuff we make. Short and sharp. So very, very varied stuff. Indie game development, release for Vive and Oculus, 360 video work, lots of things for cars, and VR is about 60-70% of what we do. And you all know these stupid statements, changing landscapes of entertainment and unprecedented revolution and 13,000% in 3 years and graphs with millions of things on them and billions of dollars worth of investment and hype curves with it on the right side of it, but it didn't really go on the wrong side of it, it's just jumped there and radar and all that sort of crazy, stupid stuff. That's all business people. But the reality is there's about 200, 300,000 people using VR, proper ones, and they reckon about 170 million by 2018, and that's Vive, Rift, and PlayStation. So not even like the pretend crappy Google Cardboard ones. So if you are a Unity developer already, you have the skills to create virtual reality content, and it's a really emerging market. Getting into mobile gaming and traditional gaming, it's a very busy, noisy place. But in VR, it's kind of all the bets are off. In my opinion, there's flavors of VR. There's one end, there's 360 video, which isn't VR really, but clients like you to say it's VR because it helps them sell stuff. And then there's true VR at the other end. But there's cinematic, hybrid, and every flavor in between. And the real reason is that one end is in linear, press play, go one turn, choose where you look. The other end is interactive, and it's a game. So whatever exists in that space. And we make all of that type of content from one end to the other. And really the core of everything we do is Unity. So even our 360 video player is a Unity app with a sphere and playing a video texture within it. And that allows us to then transition it more and more into true VR at the other end. And so that, I'll hand over to someone who actually knows how to code. This is Ben Salmon, our senior creative developer. I speak in Sol++, which is kind of like C#. Ish.
Yeah, it's close enough.
Thanks, guys.
Cool. All right, cool. How you doing?
Wow, that's heavy.
So I'm going to change the pace up a little bit. If you just give me 1 sec. So, Sol's talked about what we do, and I'm going to talk about sort of how we do it. Okay, if I could click a mouse. Right, cool. So, first of all, my name's Benjamin Salmon. I'm a senior creative developer at Rewind. I've worked for Rewind for 3 or 4 years, and in that time I've worked on just about everything you just saw in that showreel. Lots of VR, Oculus, Gear, Vive, right from the days when the Oculus integration was a Unity package right up to the native support. And now that it is native support, there's really no excuse not to be working in it. But part of my job is to ensure open communication between my team of developers and the production staff to help coordinate pipeline and workflow, especially with a strong emphasis on tool creation, generic and modular design, and as well as managing several of the apps sort of as a solo endeavor or with the team. So today I'm going to talk to you about modularity and pipeline. Woo! So this is for artists and developers, but it's also kind of applicable for anyone working in production staff or in a coordination or lead role. Obviously project management is sounds like the boring bit, but it's the bit where if you get it right, the whole thing runs a whole lot smoother. So modularity in design. I'll be talking about the modularity in project structure to ensure reusability and flexibility with a quick case study on one of the projects that we've worked on that you actually didn't see right there. And pipeline development, how to ensure a successful pipeline when restructuring or approaching a new project. Cool, so modularity. For me, modularity design revolves around the principle that all aspects of your production should be extensible, transferable, and versatile. So really I'm talking about the way that you look at the app and the way that you structure your code to ensure that you can take bits of it and put them in other places. So at Rewind, we apply modular design principles by ensuring that as many aspects of our project as possible, including our project code, but not exclusively our project code, sit within a logical hierarchy in terms of functionality and in terms of type, and can be extracted with ease. Okay, so we work on many projects from a wide variety of clients and a wide variety of needs. Not all projects are Unity appropriate, but in those that are, we've identified recurring sections of code or pipeline that can be shared between projects. For example, we're actively developing a digital showcase app. This is an app that will run on iOS and Android. It will be on the Play Store, it will be on the App Store, and a lot of our production staff will carry it around with them and use it to show a lot of our 360 content. The design principles behind it. At a high level, the project is formed of 3 main parts: the data structure and acquisition, its storage and retrieval, and the processing and display. This is a 3-stage principle that I apply to a lot of my application design. So what are those things? Data acquisition. How do I generate and structure the data which will power my application? It's also applicable to save files. In this case, our application is powered by, it's a little bit small, sorry about that, guys. You'll see it's an editor extension. It's an editor window, custom editor window. Our backend is powered by JSON files. That's a really common format. If you guys haven't seen it, it's a lot like XML. It's excellent for your save files. It's excellent for your data storage. And in our case, it's excellent for powering the content that goes into the app. The storage, the middle bit, what do we do with that data? How do we put it somewhere where our users can get at it? That's the most boring of the 3. Usually you're going to be saving it locally, like on their phone or something, in the case of save files, or in our case. For this app, we have to put it online so that the users can turn the app on, get the latest template, and download the information that they need. What does the app look like? Let's show you a little bit of that. And the final part, the processing and the display of that information. In this case, we have a data unpacker, which will load the application template. That's the template that gets generated from that editor window backend. and it will iterate through all the essential media in that template. So you're talking about any of the text in the app, because that needs to load dynamically, and any of the modules and the imagery behind them, because that needs to load dynamically. It will then push an update delegate out to anything that implements, what was the name of it? iShowcase data handler. We just have an interface, and anything in the app that needs to say, hey, you've got a new template, I need to update something. They get handed the template, the JSON file, which has been unpacked by full serializer, and they just look at it and go, well, I need that piece of information, so I'm going to adapt in that way. And that is essentially how that entire app is powered. On top of that, as far as modular design goes, the media downloader, so the section that actually talks to the www class and brings down the data, the module viewer, so that middle section right there, the pop-up system you see on the right, the media player that will play the video content, the VR camera manager that can switch between cardboard, virtual reality, Oculus, whatever it needs, camera modes, and the media renderer, so the one that can switch between mono video and stereo video. They're all modular sections. They are all parts of the app that were programmed for this app, but that can be pulled out as individual elements and can be placed in anything else Sol comes up with and asks me to make. Super important stuff. Okay. So my first tip, build an asset bank, maintain it. Consider each part of your project to be a cleanly defined and modular section. Avoid interdependency wherever possible between modules to maximize reusability and unnecessary overhead. You need to be able to pull your modules out and put them into something else. The more time you have on a project, it's very variable here at Rewind, but the more time you have on a project, the more generic and therefore reusable you want to be making your assets. If you have no time, then the quickest thing to do, you take your module, you hack together a rigid implementation for the specific thing you've been told to make, and you leave it there, and you never touch it again. That happens occasionally, but I would say that reusability of code and modular design principles are the #1 way that I can save money for my production stuff. So just as an example, we have several Unity packages from the asset store and that we've developed in-house that we will use on every single project. It doesn't matter if it's a game or an interactive application or a 360 video app, we will use them. So just as a little shameless plug, the first one that goes into everything is Pixel Perfect Game Window. We developed this tool to ensure that Unity's game window can be placed on any monitor, borderless, full screen, and any res. So Unity has great support for simply picking a res, but if you want to go borderless or you want to display 1080p with absolutely nothing around it, that can be a bit of a pain. It's like $5 on the asset store or something. It's really useful. And the second one is better material import. It's another one we developed in-house. It goes into every one of our projects, and it gives us control over where our materials go, enforcing naming conventions, allowing shared material, changing default shaders. It's basically just a fancy asset post-processor. There's nothing more to it. If you know how to do editor code, then you'll be happy writing your own as well. Okay, quickly on Pipeline. Pipeline is about promoting militant consistency for reusability and intuitive project management. Take the time to streamline your workflow and to future-proof further practice. Pipeline is also about automating the grunt work. Wasting hours on a manual task on a regular basis is effectively failing at your job. If in a production setting you are doing the same thing over and over and over again, you are wasting time and you're wasting money. So we spend a lot of time, and I personally invest a lot of time into writing tools that will speed up my job and give me more time for browsing Reddit. That's what that is. Oh yeah, that's part of the job. So yeah, find a budget. They'll pay for themselves. Standardize your pipeline, but only per project. I just wanted to quickly say, a lot of people push about being really, really, really consistent. And while consistency is absolutely key, we're in a fluid industry that is going to be changing all the time. When I joined Rewind, the DK1 came out. Now we're up to the DK2, we're up to the CV1. All the hardware's changing, all the software's changing. We've gone from Unity 3, 4, 5, whatever. So don't standardize your entire life. Don't get stuck in your ways. Every new project, take it as an opportunity to restructure the way you think about your projects. Change your naming conventions, change your file conventions. But when you're in a project, be consistent throughout that project. Create or adapt consistent regulations for all aspects of your project. That's what we're saying. Not just file structure and naming conventions. You also should be standardizing your communication protocol with your boss or your producer or your other team members. Your deadline formats, how do you give the work to other members of your team, your art production, your branding guidelines, and especially your code structure. We have freelancers in all the time. Code structure varies massively, which is fine, but generate your own and stick to it. If I see an inconsistency in an applicant's code, it's pretty much a no. If they're consistent, even if I don't agree with them, it's fair enough if they can justify it. I just wanted to make a quick point. The quality differentials in art are incredibly jarring, and I just want to make a case for the fact that that's incredibly applicable to other areas of your production. So, as an example, I'm just going to bash on Second Life real quick. You can see at the front of the train, this text is like really high res, and the front of the train is really low res, and that's why it looks crap. It's not because it's a bad piece of art, it's because it's an inconsistent piece of art, and it's been made by 50 different artists. If you are managing a team of people, consistency in your art, in your code, in your project structure is far more important. As a better example, Spyro. It's lower res textures, it's a lower res image, but it's a better piece of art because everything in that scene adheres to the same quality standard. And I just want to say, apply that to all aspects. So let's standardize your pipeline. Develop a convention and stick to it. Kind of what I've been touching on. Project structure and naming conventions. I wanted to quickly jump on something that not many websites I've found talk about. As far as project structure goes, there's kind of two main schools of thought. The first one is the one that Unity seems to push and a lot of websites seem to push. This is type-associated file structures. You guys can't really see it. It goes assets, then RWD, we use RWD, and then materials, models, prefab, scripts, sounds. You've all seen it, you've all got it in all your projects. On a tiny project, that's entirely appropriate because you're only going to have 4 or 5 assets in these folders. On a mid-scale to large-scale project, or one with a big team, especially one where you're trying to push modular design, relevance association is a far superior file structure system. Don't group your assets by type. No one wants a folder full of shaders. Group your assets by modular relevance. In this case, you can see I've got the animation controller, the material, the prefab, the script, and the shader for the oak tree asset, it's a fake asset, in my project. They're in one folder. I can extract that folder in one click. I didn't have to search for anything. It's so much better. So that's just me just kind of pushing that little bit of sort of a thought process. More tips. Import your import settings. You have asset post-processors. You can edit the import settings for any asset that goes into your project. And you can use that to ensure you have consistency. So in all the materials that go into any one of my projects that come from any one of 10 different artists, I have an asset that checks the naming conventions. It checks for prefixes and it checks for suffixes. If they don't match the naming conventions that I've set out for my team, it flags it. It gives me a debug. I can go to that artist and I can say, look, this isn't the way I asked for this asset and you need to do a better job. And it works great. Within 2 or 3 things, they get it right every time. Be consistent in your, let's see if it's the next one. In the way you do your naming conventions. Again, I've shown you how we do our project structure. This is how we do our naming conventions. Root, followed by type, followed by marker. An asset marker is something I've really been pushing with my team. There's a bit of an affiliation for underscores. They get really, really pushed. Underscores are great, fine, use them. But in the case of an asset marker, in my opinion, should never have an underscore in it. So the oak tree, a lot of artists are going to go oak underscore tree underscore diffuse. Oak tree is the marker. You use that as the base and everything else comes off it. So the format, or the variant, oak tree diffuse, oak tree mesh, oak tree, whatever else it might be, animation controller. That's just a pet peeve. I'm just pushing it on you guys. Moving on. The important thing, if you require more than a brief introduction to any system in your project, then you're doing something wrong. The number one thing is you need to be intuitive. If you can see this and you can understand this and you can do this yourself, then you can come work on my team and it's going to make sense. But if you don't know what you're looking at, then I've made a mistake. If I'm enforcing a convention on my team and I'm wrong and it's not obvious, then I need to rethink that structure. Cool. Make time and review. We're coming to the end. Set time aside between projects. Oh, there's a sweet spot on the mic. Cool. Set time aside between projects or in pre-production to develop these principles. They will pay for themselves. Emphasize intuitive design in all areas. Let things happen organically, but watch and adapt to issues. This is a big one. Encourage peer review. There's something I found a lot recently, and I've been kind of pushing it with my team. Anyone can peer review your work. They don't have to be senior necessarily, because anyone who can ask a question about why you made a decision you made is an asset. That's valuable to you. So if you can hand one of your junior artists something, and they ask you a question, why did you do it this way, even for the sake of learning, then you are benefiting from it and they're benefiting from it. So I really would encourage peer review. The other thing is they're going to catch things. My team catches every mistake I make because they see it and they go, well, they're looking for mistakes. They want to catch me out, you know it is. But they'll find it. If there's a mistake, they'll find it, and it's great. It's great. And finally, just take pride in your work. You know, we're all doing the same thing. We're all kind of doing it for the same reason. We're all trying to have fun doing it. So do the show and tell stuff. Show each other what you're doing. Show us what you're doing. As we'll get onto, we're hiring. You know, because at the end of the day, motivation and morale is the fuel that will keep these productions going and keep everyone making wicked games. So, thank you very much. I'm going to sneak this one in at the end. Come talk to us, me, Sol, or Chloe, if this sounds like the kind of place you guys might want to work. Cool. Cheers.